I told my oldest when they told me they're transgender that that broke me. And it broke me for the best reason because I stopped I stopped following the biblical standard slowly and learning from that point of speaking the truth in love, which Christians often will repeat, but they really mean speak the truth. And the loving part is I'm loving you when I point out your sins. I stepped away from speaking the truth in love to just loving.
If you're tired of arguing with strangers on the internet, try talking with one of them in real life.
Welcome to Back in America, the podcast.
My guest today spent 24 years as an FBI special agent. He worked counterterrorism, crimes against children, and public corruption. He served 15 years on a SWAT team. But before that, he was a Baptist pastor in Western New York. He is also the father of 2 transgender children. His name is Eric Robinson, and his upcoming book, Irreverent: From Saving Souls to Chasing Sinners in the FBI, comes out this fall. This is a conversation about power, conscience, and what it means to love people your institution was not built to understand. I want to start with a moment you told me about. You are in a car with your SWAT team, and those are guys you trust with your lives. And they start talking about how abusive it is for parents to let their kids transition. And you said, I've got transgender kids. And they laugh because they think it's a joke. So take me back to that time in that car. How did that silence felt to you when you were expecting them to say, I'm sorry, and that never came?
That was disappointing. These are men who've stood next to me. They've stood up for me. I love them all dearly. It was disappointing because they're good-hearted men. They've done so much for me and alongside me that I expected then that next step to be taken. And to be fair, some individuals followed up later at a different time and were so very open and accepting. And then we had conversations about what that's about, that friend's gay uncle and others he's met. And then I've had other agents come to me and ask questions so that they could better interact with transgender individuals too. So I feel like it's part of the natural progression for many people, especially who may have grown up conservative as I did, to take that issue of transgenderism and go from seeing it as something to discuss to the point of seeing it as a reality in someone's life. So when it's a topic on a television show or a news channel, then you have debates and you're removed from it. When it's your friend's child, now it's a real thing. Now it's something that you might have to internalize to say, I wonder what's that like for him, for them in their lives.
So now let's go back in time. And before that time, before all this, you were a Baptist pastor in Western New York.
Yes.
What did that work teach you about people, not the theology, but really the human part that you carried into everything that came after that?
The church that I had planted with my wife and then a handful of other established Christians was meant to be one that reached out to people who didn't go to church. And I know a lot of churches say that, but we were going out of our way to not just draw in different congregants and have somebody give their money to our church now instead of somewhere else. We were actively working to bring in people who wouldn't feel comfortable otherwise, perhaps in some churches. And while I had not grown up Baptist, that was now the denomination I was pastoring in for some time. And I was now becoming aware that if ever there was a denomination, if ever there was a type of church where someone might feel judged, it was unfortunately the church that I had been at before. So I spoke with that core group and I gave them what I called a flinch test. And I asked them, if you have someone that you're greeting at the door and they're wearing a heavy metal concert t-shirt, it's a man with earrings, it's an interracial couple, it's a homosexual couple, somebody has alcohol in their breath, how will you feel about dealing with these things that traditionally the church gets uptight about? And I wanted to make certain that these folks could welcome people. This is somebody comes to the church and they have alcohol in their breath, best place they should be is church because they need that and they need to be accepted. And so what I tried to push to my people was if we were going to fail, let's fail by showing too much grace. And in that, I saw people react well. People then embraced what we were bringing because we were winning an audience with them first. What I took from that into law enforcement was I'm going to first listen. I'm not going to tell you that I have the answers. I want to hear where you are primarily, and then we'll have a conversation. And before you trust me to show you the way to live, you you have to know me and I have to know you too. So much of what I took away from the years of ministry was being curious with people first instead of coming with a mind that's made up and being open to what someone's experience has been before they've met me.
So you've been a minister for 13 years.
I had been in Christian ministry, and the traditional way is you start as a youth pastor and then assistant pastor. And then for the last, I think 5 years I was a senior pastor. I was the lead pastor of a church.
So I'm curious, not everybody is an FBI agent. Not everybody is a minister. You did both. There is a link, right? You deal with people, you want to help people. How did that come into you? What did your parents do?
I've thought back about how my parents have raised me, and they're unremarkable. They just loved me. They accepted me. They taught me common things. So my dad was a truck driver. He played catch with my brother and me in the side yard. He would tell us stories when we were little going to bed from his army days, and then he would make some up. And things were just common, but they were supportive. And my parents' marriage was strong. I remember only one occasion where they fought. And so I think that stability helped me to be able to just make choices that I felt were going to be right. And as you point out, I did feel that my time in ministry was similar to my time in the FBI because I felt like I was doing God's work. And I don't think it was too much of a stretch to believe that because I was helping to bring justice to people. So if you're robbed, your child is harmed, whatever it might be, the church can support you in some ways, but the church isn't going to be able to bring justice. And so I think part of God's work is having a group that can now make you whole.
Can you walk me through the day when it came upon you that you were going to start the process of becoming an FBI agent?
Yep. Very easy to remember. Many pastors have done a much better job than I was able to do in separating themselves from the difficulties in their congregation. One of the realities of having a church that reached out to people who have troubles in life is that they brought their troubles into the church. And we had one of our worship leaders got a girl pregnant, another worship leader, her husband left her for a woman he met on the internet. And those are things that I couldn't let go of. If someone comes to me and says, I'm having this life issue, I I held on to it too much. And so because of that, I had stress related headaches every single day without fail for 2 years. And I came to a place where I told my wife, I have to do something different. I can't do this anymore. No doctors were helpful. Doctors said, be less stressed. And I didn't know how to do that. And so to find less stress, I joined the FBI. And it was honestly less stressful in a way that it didn't matter. Bad guys get away. Fine. I didn't care. It's not the same as this husband and wife breaking up. That matters. Bad guy not getting indicted, the justice system will get him or the streets will get him. It doesn't matter. So the actual day, this sounds like a joke, but the actual day I received notification that I was accepted in the FBI, my headache stopped.
Wow.
Which I took as an indicator that I was probably making the right decision.
Yeah, yeah. So you told me that kindness, and you just told me that again, that kindness and compassion, thing that you brought from your ministry, often made investigation more successful. Can you give me a case where treating people with humanity got you further than the pressure that you would have had or made?
Absolutely. We had a case once, this was years ago, and it was leading up to Easter. And there was a 15-year-old girl who was being pimped out by an older man. And we were working the case to try to locate her and get her out of his clutches, keeping in mind that she was willingly with him, but she's 15 years old. And there was another woman who was of age who was also assisting her in prostitution by promoting her online. That's trafficking. That is a charge that could get somebody 15 years in prison. So we set up a sting so that we could catch that woman. We caught her, and rather than start telling her how disgusting she is and how she's bringing about everything terrible in the world, I just sat with her. And in fact, I bought her a sub. I bought her a sandwich because she looked like she needed some help. So I didn't shake a stick at her. I didn't yell at her. We didn't charge her because our main purpose was to find the 15-year-old girl. And so we sat down against the side of my truck and we ate our sandwiches, and she started opening up. And I remember very well, she asked me, she said, my father has molested me since I was a child. Do you think that's why I do what I do? And I said, probably, and commiserated with her a bit, and we chatted. And then she helped us locate the girl that she had been assisting in prostitution. For her, it was amoral. It was something she was doing just to help out. Having sex with strangers was just a survival method. And if this 15-year-old girl was doing it too, then that's fine. But rather than come in harsh and hard and shaking the stick of justice at this young woman, just treat her like a person who seemed like they were hungry and needed to talk. And one thing that we had seen over the years of working instances in this human trafficking with teenage prostitutes was when the FBI stepped in and we arrested the pimp. The pimp was always their boyfriend because they were manipulative. And I had so many snotty tissues in my vehicle, and I'd been punched by girls who were angry because we were arresting the love of their life. But these young girls eventually were, for the first time, having an adult in their life stand up for them and provide support. So their
Mhm.
parents were either abusive or gone. Most were runaways because they had to get out. The police that were always just chasing them and were enemies. And so now we had FBI agents showing them care. We had guardian ad litem stepping in. We had FBI victim assistance personnel helping out. And I'd start to see a change where it almost like a stray dog that's frightened when it's beaten and slowly coming around to seeing, oh, this is what it's like when an adult is taking care of me instead of harming me. And we saw many success stories that way.
Why did you choose the bureau rather than another department?
Why not? I've never lost the fascination that this is super cool. That what I got to do and what I was getting to do is what kids dream about. And so every day, not every day. There's plenty of days I didn't want to go to work, but it remained to be something remarkable to me. And I recall what it was like when I was given that initial conditional offering to join the FBI, and before I joined, going, "Oh my gosh, this is great. This is amazing." And my dad helps me because he would tell people he'd put on an FBI cap so that somebody at the grocery store might ask him about it so he can brag about his son. And I feel like that. I feel that it's a remarkable job. It has a lot of power in it. And so with that, I held that strong sense of we need to be careful with what we're doing because it could be abusive. And so the people I was around held that respect as well.
You describe the work as being super intrusive, right? Wiretapping, breaking down doors, listening to people's private life. Even when a judge sign off on all those activities, how did you keep your conscience calibrating doing legal things that could feel on the edge of your own morality?
I didn't have a problem personally because we were within the bounds. Now, that being said, there were occasions where without giving up safety, without foregoing precaution, there are times where I would carry out a search warrant by first going to a person's house and we knew there were no firearms and said, "Look, we've got a search warrant. We're going to try to keep this quiet. How do you want us to handle this?" And there were times that I was a part of an arrest where me and two other agents just walked up, put our hands on someone in a parking lot, and my buddy said, "Hey," showed him his credentials, said, "We're the FBI, you're under arrest. Let's go ahead and go inside." So there's times where we don't need to tackle someone, we don't need to make a show, and we also want to be considerate of what this looks like, that there are police cars in the front yard. That said, there's plenty of times, especially with SWAT, where we're called because it's dangerous and we're making ruts in the front yard and maybe tearing down the front porch in order to maintain safety.
And you never thought, I'm going too far? Is that the right thing? You never.
I did not. If there's enough checks along the way that it felt fine for me. There's I've had people complain afterwards that we were pointing guns. Why wouldn't you just come to the door and politely ask or call me? And that's difficult because yes, after the fact, now we learn this is a nice fellow and he would have just abided and turned himself in, but we don't know that and we can't gamble that for the sake of having more fugitives. If a judge signed off and we follow precautions, our steps are initially we make an announcement of a police presence, given enough time for them to answer. And if they do that and everything's clean, no doors broken, no people wrestled, folks coming out calmly. So we do give people an opportunity to just
Mm.
comply.
Have you ever been scared for your life?
I have never been scared for my life. I have had one occasion where we had a woman barricaded and the trigger for us to enter was either her threatening her child that she was with or firing around. And as we were set up, about 8 of us just down a hallway, she got angry at the negotiators and fired a round through her door. Just not to harm anyone, but just in anger. And I look back at my team leader, say, "That was a shot. Are we going?" And I remember thinking, this is going to hurt, because she had threatened anybody coming through the door needs to bring body bags. And I remember thinking, some of us are going to get shot, and that's probably not going to feel too good. So I wouldn't say I was afraid for my life, but I did have a notion that this is going to be pretty painful, and I wonder how it's going to turn out. And then we had
Hmm.
one other occasion, if I can find this photo, where we had a young man who we were to arrest. He charged us with a baseball bat after we gave him every opportunity to comply. And rather than comply, he charged us, told us to kill him, and we engaged in deadly force. And I was wearing my Garmin watch, and you can tell
Oh my God.
what minute we had that encounter.
Huh.
So I take that as the body doing what it needs to. Heart rate's going up a little bit because I'm carrying tools and we're getting ready to act. And then that minute and a half encounter that we had, which ended up in his death, was up like this. And then fortunately, my body was back down to a more manageable level. And then as we had to clear the house still, people were calling out on the radio and everyone was yelling because everyone's heart rate was still up. So normally we'll say, hey, we need one over here. But instead, people are screaming the same things, not realizing that they're still full of adrenaline.
What you showed us was a picture of your heartbeat,
Yeah.
and it just jumped to the max. I don't know what it was, but
It's a
super high. But I must,
180 beats a minute.
wow. But it also falls straight after that, which means you've got perfect recoup. Yeah. All right. So let's go back to your family life. And we started by mentioning this episode in the car where you discussed the fact that you've got transgender children with your colleague. You learned a lot through what you've done at your ministry with the FBI. I wonder, what have you learned with your kids that no one else had taught you?
So I grew up Christian. I grew up fairly conservative, though everyone in my family has always been accepting enough. And yet we still had a very traditional belief system. I think that often comes from a biblical upbringing. And I told my oldest when they told me they're transgender that that broke me. And it broke me for the best reason, because I stopped following the biblical standard slowly and learning from that point of speaking the truth in love, which Christians often will repeat, but they really mean speak the truth. And the loving part is, I'm loving you when I point out your sins. I stepped away from speaking the truth in love to just loving and understanding, trying to understand the other side more. I came with a notion still. And ashamedly, I had told friends this who told me they were gay, and they might ask, "Oh, what's your opinion?" And I gave them this ridiculously stupid and shameful reply of, "Oh, you hate the sin, but you love the sinner," which means I hate everything you identify with, but somehow I still love you. I don't agree with who you are, but damn it, I'm still behind you, and it makes no sense. It can't be true. And so I had to confront that and realize I just need to love and not think I have some sort of truth. I need to be even more open to what people are experiencing.
What about the courage that they demonstrated?
Absolutely. My first thought was, how could you not trust that your mother and I would support you? And of course, everything comes from, typically, at least it does for me, it comes from that selfish point of view. So much courage of seeing, here's my father was a Baptist pastor. I know my parents love me, but there's so many indicators around that say I might be disowned. I've seen it happen to my friends. I'm not sure if this will change my relationship with my parents, but yeah, so much courage to take that leap and say, I'm going to be authentic. And it starts with my home.
So you were trained on the constitutional boundaries for 24 years at least. When you watch videos of immigration enforcement today, ICE, people pulled from their vehicle, arrested in front of families, what does your training tells you about what you're seeing? And where is the line between enforcing law and violating the right you sworn to protect?
I can tell you two things about that. One is that broadly, when I would speak about that with other agents, having just recently retired, across the board, even those who support what immigration is doing, they would not do that themselves because it's against the law. And so, secondly, with that, the FBI has now been tasked with doing some immigration enforcement. But so prior to that, we had immigration officials give us legal training. And among that legal training that we were given, which felt right in line with what most agents already knew, the idea of coming up to a vehicle and pulling someone out is not legal. If I do not have knowledge of a person in that vehicle having not having status in the United States, I cannot break doors, open doors. So it's illegal.
Do you think everybody talks about respecting the Constitution, enforcing the Constitution, and it seems to be a very fluctuating notion for people interpreting the Constitution, understanding the Constitution. What do you make of that?
I agree that there are difficulties and differences in interpreting the Constitution, but I cannot seize you without judicial authority. I can walk up to your vehicle, I can walk up to your front door, and I can ask, would you step out? I can ask your immigration status. I can ask questions. You can also say, I don't want to talk to you. And that's where I have no more authority. If I don't have a reason to believe that your status here is not legitimate and skin color does not count for that, I can do no more. And fortunately for us in the FBI, we have worked only with judicial warrants. We don't have administrative warrants as immigration officials may have, but even with the administrative warrants, those have limited authority.
So we are coming at the end of our interview, but I want to ask you about your book, right? You wrote all that life experience in a book that you called, I believe, Irreverent: From Saving Souls to Chasing Sinners in the FBI. It should come out this fall.
Yes.
So you've been a pastor, you've been an FBI agent, a father of two transgender kids. You are now retired, and you are watching the country argue about everything you lived for and you stand up for. Let me ask you, what is America to you?
I I still believe in the union. I still believe in supporting the nation. The difficulty is the bastardization that's come about. So two of the things that I hold close to me are Christianity and patriotism. And yet if you put the two together with Christian nationalism, you have groups of individuals that I used to investigate for wanting to bring violence to people. So it's difficult. It's difficult when, and I know you're asking me about America, but I'll bring it to what's more meaningful to me, but with the Christian faith that I had so often seen in my investigations, very literal white supremacists who may call themselves, I'm not me calling them names, they may even call themselves Nazis, who would have Bible verses on their Facebook page next to something horrid, next to a friends list where someone prominent in my church is a friend of theirs and sees no problem. And that's upsetting. So if something like that's upsetting in my church, it's going to be upsetting in my country too.
Where does that take us?
I'm not an old man, but I try to think back to the resilience of not just our country, but of people, where we've had periods. I was barely alive in the 60s. I didn't have much of a conscience for that time, but there was much hatred and violence in the 60s and 70s. There was worse racism in the decade before that, and our nation has come to a better place. And now we have a bit of a slide into years of more racism coming back, not nearly as bad, but I trust that goodness prevails, and I will hold to, once again, if it doesn't prevail, then I'll probably be closing my circle of those that I trust around me.
Eric, thank you so much. Is there anything else you want to add? Is there any message you want to transmit before we stop this interview?
I would say, I'll say this, just speaking towards issues with the FBI, the headlines and the arguments that people have about how the FBI is working is part of a separate FBI. The men and women in the field who are analysts, who were support operations specialists, who are agents, almost all, and there's always problems, but almost all of them just want to do good, just want to bring justice, and want to follow constitutional laws. So if people begin to lose faith in the FBI, please don't lose faith in some of the leadership and those in DC who are working a political plan. The men and women in your town are going to be the ones trying to do good.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you for your time.
Oh, thanks, Stan.